Hello and welcome to the Royal Rota, your weekly podcast from ITV News, a slightly delayed podcast this week. It's been a busy one, hasn't it, Lizzie? But you can watch us as usual on YouTube, or you can listen to us on your favourite podcast platform. You can watch and see what has been, a busy week.
Yeah, very busy week. Apologies that we are slightly late with it this week. But it does mean that we can pack in everything that's happened over the last few days. And it has been a really big few days, particularly for the Queen.
Yeah, we kind of thought, well, if we've recorded it on Thursday, we're going to miss the Queen being at the G7. If we recorded it on Friday, we're going to miss Trooping the Colour on Saturday. If we recorded it on Saturday, we're going to miss Joe Biden at Windsor Castle on Sunday. So kind of thought, well, let's wait for everyone to do their thing. Joe to go home or go to Brussels, wherever Joe went. And then we can do everything in one place.
Exactly. So it'll be a full roundup and just a slightly delayed one this week.
And a week that started, if you go back as far as last Sunday, with an announcement from the Sussexes that the Queen's the Queen's now got 11 great-grandchildren. There's a 8th in line to the throne. So others have been bumped down further down the list. And there's also been, people have been remembering the 100th birthday, or what would have been the 100th birthday of Prince Philip.
You've just done my entire list.
Yeah, we decided not to do a Robinson's Royal Rota this week because actually...
You've just done it. You've just done it.
Right, okay, so we'll call it Ship's Script or something this week instead of Robinson's Royal Rota. Mm-hmm. So where should we start? Do you want to start with the G7? Do you want to start with baby Sussex? Do you want to start with Duke of Edinburgh's 100th birthday? What do you want to do?
Do we want to go in chronological order through the week?
Okay then, so Sunday night, ping, email, Sussex, there's a new baby, she's called Lilibet, and that's when what do we call it? The trouble started, controversy started, difficulty started, disagreement started. What word do we describe that?
Nothing's ever simple, is it?
No. Well, I tell you what we should say, happy news, baby's born, Meghan and Harry have got a little girl. It's their second child. What amazing news. And what a nice name, Lilibet Diana.
Yeah, so we had the announcement. We were allowed to announce it at 5 p.m. UK time last Sunday, so a week ago. Little Lilibet was born on Friday, 4th of June at 11:40 a.m. local time. So
in California. Born in California.
And she was born at the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, weighing 7 pounds and 11 ounces, and the announcement told us that her full name would be Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. So Lilibet, a nod to the Queen's sort of very personal family nickname. Well,
I'd say more than a nod, to be fair.
More than a nod.
Well, it is. I mean, it's not a nod to her nickname. It is her nickname. It was her nickname.
And it all started when the Queen was very little and she couldn't say Elizabeth, so she sort of came up. She used to say Lilibet, and then the family. It was a personal family name for her, and then Diana, obviously, Harry's mother. So both very, very personal family names to Prince Harry.
Yes. Now, Bedoria wasn't in there, for example. No name for Meghan's mother, just on Harry's side. So, look, I think
which, given how personal the names were and the family links, we know how close Meghan is to her mother and how close Doria is to both Harry, Meghan, and to Archie, and she's sort of a key figure for them. For her not to be nodded to in the name, I thought was quite surprising.
Yes. Okay. So listen, let's be clear. Princess Charlotte has the name Elizabeth and Diana in her names. That's what her name is. So what was so controversial, or what was the difficulty in terms of family relations, so we say, about using Lilibet or Lily Diana?
Well, it came because it was Lilibet, not Elizabeth. It wasn't the Queen's name. It was her very personal nickname. Right. And Harry and Meghan said they had essentially told the Queen that they wanted to use it, and she was supportive of that. That's coming from Harry and Meghan's spokespeople. And then there were sort of briefings being given out to the American media through their friends that they'd asked the Queen.
And therein lies the problem. The question is, did they ask the Queen permission before Lilibet was born, or did they simply tell the Queen as the first person to tell that they had a new baby girl and she was called Lilibet. And I think looking at all the statements, and we can read you exactly what was said to whom and when, it looks like that Harry and Meghan phoned the Queen after Lilibet was born, after she was named, and said, "Hey, Granny, just to let you know, we've named her Lilibet."
Yeah, there's a big difference, isn't there, between being asked and being told.
And we think it's the latter.
We think it's the latter.
I mean, actually, and it's not just us this thing. It's Sussexes basically said that, didn't they? Like in the statement that issued by their spokesperson in California, it was actually Harry told his grandmother prior to the announcement. They didn't say anything about prior to the birth or asking permission prior.
Yeah, they said that she was the first person that Harry had called.
Yes. Yeah, to tell her about the name. So, I mean, Lilibet, okay, so it's the name that actually King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, used to call their baby daughter, or Elizabeth, when she was little, because as you rightly say, that was the name that was how she pronounced her own name. It's kind of stuck with her. It's also a name that Prince Philip used for his wife as well in terms of endearment. So a very, very personal name. And I suppose the issue that people have, if they do have an issue with it, is that actually this is the royal family that Harry and Meghan have had such a massive public falling out with. There's not just been the accusations of racism, the fact that the institution that the Queen has led for 69 years was not well run, that Prince Charles was not a good parent to Harry, that the Queen was not a good parent to Prince Charles, that they were cut off financially. All of that Harry and Meghan have put in the public domain. No one's dragged it out of them. And yet then they are choosing to use a very personal name to the Queen for their daughter.
Yeah, and there were two ways of reading it, weren't they? There was the one camp which said, oh, perhaps this is an olive branch, them reaching out to the royal family after what have been a very turbulent, I think we could say, year. Others said they are using a very personal name to maintain that tie to the royal family, even though they've departed.
Yes, because whatever else, Lilibet, for the rest of her life, I mean, she's going to have this enduring link to the Queen of England because of the name that she has and the very personal name that it was to the Queen. So, yeah, are you right? Was it an olive branch to say, hey, guys, look, we're reaching out to you. We've called our baby daughter after the Queen. Or was it actually, well, hello, America, we've kind of left the royal family now. We've quit the UK. Our life is in the US. And therefore, we've decided to remind everyone that our daughter has these links to the royal family in Great Britain.
Whichever it was, though, later in the week, there was a report from the BBC via a palace source, which said clearly the Queen was not asked about using that name.
Yes, and so then we're into this thing about, can you trust a royal source? The thing is, this actually came from a very senior person within the household, and it would appear that the Queen wanted it known that she was not asked in advance. In other words, and there has been isn't there been a report in the Mail that actually, the Mail on Sunday, that the palace is going to fight back more openly when they think that Harry and Meghan have put out things that they don't think is true. Nevertheless, we've had from a very senior person, and we spoke to these people as well. They say it is very hard to deny these reports that the Queen was not told. I'll tell you something else as well. I had a communication from a very senior palace aide who put it much more bluntly than that. They said she was not told. So
it wasn't shut down, was it?
Well, not just not shut down. It was confirmed that she was not told.
Yeah. So I think two very different stories, as usual, when it comes to the Sussexes. This is kind of an old pattern now, isn't it? That sort of anything they do is being disputed. Anything they say is being disputed. Go back to recollections may vary.
But how can recollections vary about something that only happened a few days before? I mean, literally, the baby was born on Sunday, and on the Thursday, that was the Wednesday, wasn't it? We had this this report that kind of blew up that actually the Queen was not told. So, I mean, recollections of 3 or 4 days ago, you think, well, someone here is not telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. I think it shows still just how difficult this relationship is, and it seems that we're nowhere close to any repairs being made.
Absolutely not. And also, I mean, we're presuming that in less than a month's time, Prince Harry will be over in the UK for the unveiling of the statue to his mother. I mean, that's kind of the next thing. Now they've got the G7 and Joe Biden's visit out the way. There's kind of the next thing the royal family is going to have to turn to in terms of, well, how are we going to deal with this one? You have Prince Harry coming over after everything he said to Oprah, after everything he said on the podcast, after everything he said in that mental health series. And now he's coming over to the UK. After we've had this public spat about the name of his little girl, it's pretty sad, isn't it?
It's really sad. At the heart of it is a family that is kind of publicly fallen out, and that's really sad. And it, as you say, it is happy news, of course.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the trouble. It's really, really happy news that Harry and Meghan have had a baby girl. I mean, how lovely! It's wonderful, but the week's been a little bit different to just reporting happy news.
And on Sunday, I was thinking, gosh, this is so much more straightforward than the announcement around Archie's birth. Do you remember the kind of confusing press release we had? The fact that they didn't want to do the picture on the steps. This time they very much got to do it their way and their time.
Here's another contradiction. Do you remember that Harry and Meghan did not want to say which hospital the baby was born at in London? Archie, this is. And we had a massive sort of to and fro with what were then the palace spokespeople. No, there's private information. Why then did they just tell us straight up and down which hospital Lily was born at?
I guess it's on their terms, isn't it? They want to do things on their terms and not feel
on their terms, but a complete contradiction to what they did before, which tell us we don't want to tell you which hospital Archie was born at because that's private information, and they never told us. In fact, we're still kind of guessing about which one it was.
Well, no, the way we found out, wasn't it, the birth certificate gave away that it was the Portland. Yeah. It didn't come from Harry and Meghan last time.
Anyway, I mean, that was just something else I just thought jumped out at me about, well, what is the difference? I mean, yes, you're doing it on your own terms, fine. Well, and you haven't issued a picture, that's entirely up to them. The world is not owed a picture of this little girl, but they've done this on their own terms, but contradicting themselves in terms of announcing where she was born, the time she was born at, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, very different to Archie, but I suppose that's what they wanted, wasn't it, when they walked away, the chance to do things how they wanted to.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, okay, so that's Sunday and Monday and a bit of Wednesday of last week. Thursday, now let's talk about Thursday because it would have been Prince Philip's 100th birthday. So what the Queen did was to release some pictures. She was presented with a rose. It was actually filmed a few days beforehand, but at Windsor Castle, she was presented with a rose. It was called the Duke of Edinburgh's rose. I think we'll just let these pictures run, actually. We'll talk about it, and we'll just let the long pictures run over what happened. The chap who presented the rose to the Queen was from the Royal Horticultural Society, the RHS, of which the Queen is patron. He's got a very apt name. He's called Keith Weed. Yes, Keith Weed. Very apt for the boss of the RHS. And he presented this Duke of Edinburgh's rose. It's a newly bred rose. I didn't see any flower on it because he says the cold weather's actually kept the flower back a bit, but it's gone into the ground in the East Terrace. Is it called the East Terrace or the East Lawn? East Terrace of Windsor Castle.
Called the East Terrace Garden, and the Duke actually played quite a significant role in redesigning the garden. So it's quite apt that that's where it's been planted. So we saw the Queen, as you can see from the pictures if you're watching, being presented with the rose, or what will eventually become the rose, and then they popped it in the.
It's not still a rose, even though it hasn't flowered. Really, it's still a rose. It just doesn't have a flower in it.
Yes, yeah. You know what I mean.
It's been chucked in the ground, or delicately placed in the ground.
Popped it into the pre-prepared hole in the ground.
Yeah. I thought a little bit hidden, personally. I mean, I would have had it a bit more front and centre, but I'm not a gardener, so he knows best. He's the head gardener at Windsor, presumably the chap called Philip. Philip
Carter, the head gardener at Windsor Castle. He had the honour of popping it in the ground. So a very nice, touching tribute. And royalties from each rose will go to the Duke of Edinburgh's Award Living Legacy Fund. Bit of a mouthful, but
right. Now,
nice.
Of course, as we say every week, if you're watching on YouTube, you would have seen those pictures as we were speaking. If you're listening to this on the podcast platform, then these kind of pictures you will find on our Instagram page at ITV News Royals, or you can find us on Twitter. Me and Lizzie are both there. Not very hard to find on Twitter at the moment. So there, if you want to find the picture, you know where to go. Right, so that's kind of Thursday. That was Wednesday night into Thursday morning, wasn't it? And it was would have been Prince Philip's birthday on Thursday. We did an interview with his daughter. In fact, it was the only interview that Princess Anne has given since the death of her father. We recorded it a couple of weeks ago at Gatcombe Park, which is Princess Anne's estate in Gloucestershire. And the reason we went there was to talk about a passion of Prince Philip's, which is engineering, but also significantly an award which carries Princess Anne's father's name.
Yeah, the Prince Philip Medal, which is a medal awarded by the Royal Academy of Engineering every other year normally to a engineer that has given outstanding contribution to the field.
And what's the word for every other year? It's biennial as opposed to biannual.
Yes, and so this year...
So biannual is twice a year and biennial is every other year.
Yeah, so normally every other. This year, it wouldn't normally have been presented this year, but they decided to present it especially to mark his centenary, and that was planned a while ago, but they decided to continue with that even after he passed away. And it went this year to the first woman since the award started, Dr. Gladys West.
And about time too. I mean, 30 years has been running, and you know the Royal Academy of Engineering has organised this award, and about time it did go to a woman, and particularly because one of Princess Anne's passions is about getting more women and girls into the field of engineering or into science and mathematical subjects. So great that it went to Dr. Gladys West. So we're going to let you listen to a little bit of Princess Anne's conversation with Dr. West, which she conducted on via video link to Virginia in the US. So this is Princess Anne talking to Gladys West, giving her the Prince Philip Medal for outstanding contribution to engineering.
My father, of course, was he was a naval officer, but he was also a navigator. So for him, your work has been particularly relevant.
This is just too much for me. I am really joyful about this. I'm so pleased that I am being recognized. It's me who's being recognized. It makes a difference.
And the reason why Gladys West got the medal is because actually the work that she did in the 1970s and 80s, when computers were bigger than the size of my house, and she was sort of mathematically mapping the surface of the Earth, and that enabled engineers of the future, the engineers who followed her, to basically develop GPS, which is something all of us use if we're going out for a run, if we stick on Google Maps in the car, everyone uses GPS. And Dr. Gladys West basically kind of invented it by doing the work beforehand. So pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, and amazing for her to be honoured. And as you say, about time too that it is a woman that has been honoured, and something that is very important to Princess Anne, but also very important to her father as well. Yes. She's continuing his legacy and work in the field of engineering. So we've often talked about the similarities between Anne and Philip, and that extends their interests.
Very much her father's daughter, isn't she? In one of the conversations she was having was about how she wanted to give teachers a hug when they were saying, look, showing girls that engineering isn't this sort of oily rag thing, to use Princess Anne's words. It's about building, it's about engineering, it's about technology, it's about computers, it's about all the things that we do now, and to try and sort of dispel that myth that engineering is, as Princess Anne said, oily rag. But actually, the reason we filmed that, and that's a beautiful backstory, I think you'll agree. But the reason we were there was to ask her a little bit about her father's legacy, given she hasn't actually spoken. You might recall that at the time of her father's death, she put out a picture of the two of them at the Olympics, wasn't it, Lizzie?
Yeah, the 2012 Olympics in London.
At the 2012 Olympics, and she said, look, you know it's going to happen, but you're never really ready. But she'd never actually spoken on camera before, so she spoke to ITV, and we're going to play you just a few excerpts of my conversation with her, and let's have a chat on the other side. In all the coverage there's been since the death of your father, a lot of people have said they just learned things about him they simply didn't know before.
Yes, I think you're right. I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations. And his perspective was really important. I think your life experience makes a huge impact, and he'd seen a lot of it. And across a really wide area of both work in industry and in academia.
You told a reporter at around the time of your 70th birthday that actually if you weren't a princess of the United Kingdom, that actually you might well have been an engineer.
I think that's probably true, because I think if anything broke, there was always a matter of, have a look at this, see if you could mend it. I mean, you didn't throw things away. I mean, I'm that old. That often comes from your own family background. Anybody goes through Royal Naval training and spends time on a ship, and you have to mend and make do. You have to make things work and be practical and adjust. It's not a bad background for looking at things.
Just a point of reminiscing, if you'll allow me. I spoke to Prince Pavlos of Greece just before your father's funeral, and he was telling me how once he was at Balmoral and it was raining, and yet all of this sort of equipment came out of the back of the Land Rover that you kind of think that your father might well have engineered himself because of the way he liked things to work.
It wasn't a Land Rover, it was the trailer.
Yes, so at the back of the trailer came all the bits of barbecue.
The trailer was designed specifically for that role. It was actually made by the engineer at Sandringham, but it was designed entirely for that purpose, and everything had a place, and you needed to know where that was. And then it worked really well.
So that was the Princess Royal speaking about her father. And you know what? I like the little tale about the barbecue trailer, because you know who told me about that? And if you go back into a previous podcast, it was Prince Pavlos of Greece, who you didn't remember he told us about going over to Balmoral. It was chucking it down with rain. It was miserable. It was high up in the mountains, and Prince Philip would get out the barbecue from the back of the Land Rover and say, "Sit there, eat that, and you'll be fine."
I like the way that Princess Anne said about the trailer that everything had a place, and if you knew where that was, then it would work very well.
Very well indeed, exactly. So, and there was that famous picture. I mean, we won't show you it because it's slightly contentious in itself. It's the 1969 royal family documentary when you've got Princess Anne and Prince Philip barbecuing in Balmoral, and his barbecues were famous. In fact, didn't Prince Harry say at the time of his death, the master of the barbecue? That's how he referred to his grandfather.
He did, yeah, and we know what a special place Balmoral is to all of them. It was the photo that the Queen released on the eve of the funeral was of her and the Duke of Edinburgh at Balmoral, and we know it's a very special place to all of them. And he used to love barbecuing there by the locks.
And loved engineering. And actually, so have a look at this picture if you're watching on YouTube. This is in 1976. It's the founding meeting at Buckingham Palace of the Royal Academy of Engineering. You'll probably notice from this picture, not a single face there isn't white and isn't male, which is in itself says a lot about the problem with engineering. And hopefully we've come a long way since then. But this is a founding meeting of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Prince Philip arranged it at Buckingham Palace. Only one person who was at that meeting is still alive to this day. He's called Professor Caldwell. He's 95, I think, himself, isn't he?
And he spoke about, we spoke to him, and he was telling us how incredibly supportive and passionate Prince Philip was about the field of engineering, and how he would not only the founding meeting at Buckingham Palace, but throughout his life, the meetings that he used to come to and the questions he used to ask, and a real interest in this area. Yeah,
absolutely. So anyway, so I think a moment, I think, to reflect on Prince Philip's birthday. And actually CNN had an interview with Prince Edward, didn't they? And actually Prince Edward was asked about things like the Sussexes and other such matters, and kind of just said, look, we're all families have their ups and downs, and that was how he explained it, wasn't it?
Yeah, very tactful, I thought.
So for marking Prince Philip's 100th birthday, then Friday became the start of what for the Queen was quite a busy weekend, because sure you will know that the G7 summit, the first time that world leaders have been able to meet in person, got underway in the beautiful Carbis Bay in Cornwall. Now, anyone who doesn't know the geography of the UK, it's the sticky out bit right down in the southwest. It's the county of Cornwall, within which there is a town called St Ives. It's absolutely beautiful, and that's where they held the G7. What was the castle called where they stayed?
Something like
Tregenna Castle. It looks stunning, and actually all the interviews were done on the beaches, all the photocalls were on the beaches, so all the political leaders were meeting there. So we won't run over that ground. We could talk about pandemics and Northern Ireland protocols and Joe Biden and all the rest of it, but anyway, this is a royal podcast, so we're going to tell you about the royal bits, because not only did the Queen go down there with Prince Charles, Camilla, William, Kate, this top tier of the royal family. The royal engagements all started with an event at a very little school that Lizzie and I were at, where Jill met Kate.
Yes,
Jill and Kate.
The First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, met the Duchess of Cambridge.
Right,
give it its formal title.
Its formal title. Jill met Kate is also known as the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, met the Duchess of Cambridge.
And they were doing an engagement that was on an issue that's incredibly close to both of their hearts, which is early years education. And they went to a school called the Connor Downs Academy in a place called Hale. And
school, wasn't it?
It was a lovely school, and they met some of the children who, in one of their classrooms, did some sort of school exercises with them. And they went outside and met the school bunny. So the school has animals for the children to kind of learn how to care and nurture. And Dr. Biden and the Duchess met the school bunny Storm. And then they held a roundtable discussion with experts in the field of early years.
Yes, and also they penned an opinion piece, didn't they, the following day? But let's run through. So let's set the scene for you for a start. So you're talking here about, we just explained where Cornwall is, quite a rural county. Within that, there's a village called Connor Downs, and Connor Downs has a lot of sort of small lanes getting to the school. Well, what rocked up in front of the school? We'll have a look at this if you're watching on YouTube. A big old convoy. Now, this picture was on my Twitter feed, which I took from outside the school. I counted 8 cars in it, which I think is a little bit shorter than her husband's 13-car convoy. But it swept into the school playground. They could barely shut the school gate because the cars were parked nose to tail. Little village, no one had seen anything quite like it before. The Duchess had actually turned up about 5 minutes before the First Lady. Her convoy was 2 vehicles. Jill Biden's was 8. So there were a lot of cars to fit into that school playground. But I thought it was a very nice visit. And the head teacher said to us beforehand, she described the 2 women as passionate educators. And it meant a lot to that teacher because of the type of children they have at that school. A quarter of them are from disadvantaged backgrounds. Some of them have had what she called adverse childhoods. And it's very important to them because the work that Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, is doing in this field in terms of the importance of getting to children between the ages of 0, birth, and 5. Those are the 5 most important years in which you affect the rest of their lives. Whatever you do in those early years affects the next 50 or 60 years of a child's life.
And we know this is, from the work that we've covered with the Duchess, that this is incredibly close to her heart. But she actually said at the roundtable discussion, didn't she, that she is committed to this for the long term. So yes. I think throughout her life, we're going to see her working in this area, and she's incredibly knowledgeable on it. She knows what she's talking about. She spends a lot of time behind the scenes working and speaking to experts and learning about this, and it's an area that she is really dedicated to.
So they went into the classroom. I think the first thing to say is that the children were sort of stunned into silence. There was no big woohoo, hey, like it literally was. They went. These
children, I mean, there were about 20 4 to 5-year-olds in this classroom. Yeah. They were impeccably behaved. They were amazing, and it's quite scary. There was sort of quite a lot of media in this little classroom.
You were in the room. That's pretty scary.
I was in the room, but there were lots of us because there was the UK media and the US media, and the children were brilliantly behaved and handled it incredibly well. Yeah. I thought.
So have a listen to how the First Lady and Kate kind of reacted to the silence in the room. Have a listen to this.
Hello, hi. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
We're scared to death.
This is my classroom, yeah. the quietest class I've ever
I
been
know,
to.
I agree.
And then afterwards, the American media that were in the room were asking Jill Biden what she thought about the whole thing of early years. And as herself, a former teacher in the upper years, as she said, she knows how important it is for the child's development, what happens to them in the very, very earliest years. So this is what Jill Biden said.
So I can tell you that as a teacher at the upper levels, if they don't have a good foundation, they fall so far behind.
So as I mentioned earlier, they then had a round table with experts and sort of lots of contributions, and got to the end and they were wrapping up, and Dr. Biden was saying that, you know, she really could sit there. She had so many questions, and she would have liked to have sat there for a long time discussing it. And you know, Kate said that their two countries would have to continue to work on this issue together.
Ultimately, my hope is that we change the way we think about early childhood, and I hope our two countries can keep sharing data, knowledge and best practice.
And then, now, I think the rules of engagement are slightly different, because, and I think maybe we would act differently if we were abroad, but there was a question thrown to the Duchess of Cambridge from a reporter from NBC News. So before anyone shouts at us for throwing the question, it wasn't. It came from a reporter from NBC News who was on the sort of travelling presidential press pool, and decided that they would ask Kate about her new niece.
Oh, I wish her all the very best. I can't wait to meet her, because we haven't yet met her yet. So hopefully that will be soon.
Have you FaceTimed with her?
No, I haven't. No.
I think this took the media, the UK media, by surprise, as it did the Duchess. You know, we were all packing up our equipment to go outside and film the departure, and then this question came from Andrea Mitchell, as you say, and we were all, I think, quite surprised, because that doesn't normally happen really when the UK pool are covering engagements on their own. But I thought the Duchess, actually, she looked quite surprised, but she handled it very diplomatically, I thought.
Yes, she certainly didn't discuss the name and whether or not the Queen was asked, but just said we haven't met her. But if she said,
and that's
go back to
the follow-up question about have you FaceTimed, to which she had to say, no, we haven't.
No, well, nor would I really expect them to. You know, if the relationship between William and Harry is as bad as we know it is, you know, why would they be FaceTiming? I know this is very happy news, but we also know that the relationship is very bad. So, you know, I don't think that's a great surprise to anyone. So that visit ended. So that was the beginning of the royal engagement. And then it sort of augmented quite dramatically in the evening, didn't it? Because the top tier of the royal family were trundled down. We understand the Queen and Charles and Camilla got the royal train down to Cornwall. And actually, we've spoken about the royal train before. It's an expensive bit of kit, train, carriages, and everything else. Trundling down, you've got to pay the fees to use the track. But they say it's often used for the Queen because of her age and because of security as well. And I kind of meant, given that what weekend was coming up, the fact that she had Trooping the Colour in Windsor at 11 o'clock the next morning, then she could get the train on Friday night, sleep on it, get off at Windsor and go and do her engagement. So no pictures of the train, but that's just our understanding of how she got there and back, because it was a busy weekend. It was G7 leaders at the Eden Project in Cornwall on Friday night, Trooping the Colour Saturday, Joe Biden in Windsor on Sunday. So let's talk about the G7 summit. We saw them all arriving under a sort of canopy of trees, didn't we? The top tier, and they met Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie, and then they were there to entertain the great and the good of the G7.
Yeah, so the senior members of the family then met leaders, and the Queen then went for a family photograph.
When we say family photograph, that's the not royal family photograph. It's the loose name that we always refer to at these summits when everyone gets together for one of those official photos. It's always called the family photo. So
the Queen front and centre, surrounded by the world leaders, and she hasn't lost her quick wit, has she? Because she said, and we'll play it to you, but in case you can't hear it, she said, "Are we supposed to look like we're having fun?"
How's that?
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes.
So, I mean, the key thing about the royal family being at an event like this is just it's kind of something that Britain can do that no other country can. So, yes, G-summits happen in all parts of the world, but the royal family being there gave this, I think, most leaders would probably agree, it gave this meeting that sort of added edge. And there were actually lots of pictures, not moving pictures, but still pictures of the Queen meeting Joe Biden and chatting to Emmanuel Macron of France and Angela Merkel of Germany, etc. And there was also quite an important speech, wasn't there, from the Prince of Wales, who wanted to make sure that, as well as addressing this emergency that is the pandemic, that the world leaders were also looking at the emergency that is climate change.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll forgive me interrupting all your conversations, but I think you were warned that this might happen. So I just wanted to say, if I may, how much I applaud, for what it's worth, your determination during this G7 summit to create a greener and more prosperous future in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The global health emergency has shown us what a truly borderless crisis looks like. And of course, we did not fully see COVID coming, yet climate change and biodiversity loss represent a borderless crisis, the solutions to which have been argued about and postponed for far too long. The fight against this terrible pandemic provides, if ever one was needed, a crystal clear example of the scale and sheer speed at which the global community can tackle crises when we combine political will with business ingenuity and public mobilization. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing it for the pandemic. So, if you don't mind me saying so, we must also do it for the planet.
Now, there's a thing called the Big Lunch. So they're at the G7 project. Sorry, they're at the Eden project. So this is these big, what do you call them? Biomes, big domes in Cornwall. And actually, we've got to do a shout out to a family that allowed us to film in their field in a minute. But anyway, we'll get to that. So these big, it's very hard to describe the Eden project, isn't it? It's like an educational, eco, biodiverse, flora, fauna place. I can't think of a better way of describing it, but it's famous
I'm not sure the Eden Project PR team is going to be on the phone.
No, well, if the Eden Project PR team want to get hold of me and tell me exactly how you describe it, then that would be quite good. Be helpful for everyone. But anyway, so they've got these big domes. They're quite famous. They're actually constructed in a former quarry or former mine in that part of Cornwall. And I've completely lost my thread. I don't even know where I was going. So we were talking. Oh, yes, that's right. So it said the G7 people were doing their thing. But also the royal family separately had an event called the Big Lunch, which is connected to the Platinum Jubilee next year. And so the Queen and the Duchess of Cornwall and the Duchess of Cambridge went off to the Big Lunch, even though it was in the evening. Confusing, I know.
They did. And that quick wit I mentioned earlier of the Queen when she sat down for the family photograph of the leaders was on show again later that evening, because she was cutting this quite large cake with some sort of ceremonial sword, and an aide sort of said, oh, you know, there is a knife there if you would like to use it. And this is what the Queen had to say.
Right, very dangerous. I don't think this is going to work.
With two hands.
There is a knife there as well. What? There is a knife. I know there is.
I've absolutely no idea why someone thought it was a good idea to give the Queen what looked like a curved sword to cut a cake when there was a knife available. But hey,
that's not how you cut all your cakes.
No, I normally cut my cake with a knife from the kitchen drawer, but you know, that's just
you don't get the sword out.
I'm not sure I have a sword in this house. I might have some plastic ones, but certainly nothing that's going to cut a cake. But then it looks like even this big metal sword wasn't the best thing to cut a cake with either.
I like the way she said, though, that it's most unusual.
Yes.
I'll give it a go.
This is not how I normally cut cakes. The Big Lunch, by the way, is actually an organisation that gets people together, brings communities together over food, over lunch and all the rest of it. And it will be part of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations next year, bringing communities together over lunch and all the rest of it as part of those commemorations.
I think the Duchess of Cornwall is patron of the Big Lunch.
Yes. She has, and we've been to a few of them, haven't we? Where she's done them in schools, or she does them abroad as well. There are some big lunches in the Commonwealth, and they've already announced with the Platinum Jubilee commemorate celebrations that the big lunch will happen in all the capital cities, I think, of all the Commonwealth countries as well. So that's Eden Project. Then everyone goes home. All the leaders go back to the G7 summit. All the royals disperse back to wherever they were going, hopping back on the royal train. And that meant that on Saturday at 11 o'clock in the morning, even though the G7 Eden Project thing was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening. So 11 o'clock the following morning, the Queen's back in Windsor in the quadrangle, because what happens on the second Saturday of June every year?
It's Trooping the Colour, which is how the Queen's official birthday is marked. So for the
Explain
second
official birthday and real birthday, because everyone always asks, why does the Queen have two birthdays?
So the real birthday is the date that she was actually born.
Like most people.
The official birthday is when it's sort of celebrated on a more ceremonially.
But do you know why?
It was chosen for a summer date because the weather was a bit better.
It was chosen for meteorological reasons, correct? Because even though the Queen's born in April, which isn't a million miles away from June, I think it originated with something like George IV or something like that. I can't remember. And he had his birthday in the depths of winter in December, January or February. And it was decided that if you were going to hold a parade to honour the monarch's birthday, why would you do it in the UK in February? Move it to June. So it's always held on the second Saturday of June, apart from when there's coronavirus and there's a pandemic on. So Trooping the Colour hasn't actually happened for 2 years. This isn't trooping. It's kind of loosely called mini trooping, but it's essentially a parade of military in the quadrangle at Windsor Castle.
Yeah, so for the second year in a row, behind the ceremony, behind palace walls, because obviously they don't want to draw crowds. But this year was scaled up a little bit on last year, about 3 times the size of last year, and included 70 horses, including the household cavalry. So it's a huge spectacle, lots of pomp and ceremony, and the Queen looked like she was really enjoying it, and she looked absolutely delighted when the RAF fly past went.
Yes, when the red arrows went overhead, have a look at these pictures. The red arrows go overhead. Queen looks up, a big smile lights up her face. I mean, actually, I think the red arrows went on to do something at the G7 later that day. In any case, so they also had a pretty busy weekend. But there's something about a fly past, isn't there? Especially a fly past when there's red, white, and blue smoke coming out of the back of them. It's always pretty
very impressive. And yeah, she was tapping her foot to the band and really looking like she was enjoying herself. And this year it was the Scots Guards that were trooping their colour.
Yes, the Scots Guards trooped their colour, and it was on a hot day as well. I wouldn't want to be under one of those bearskins. In fact, if you have a look at the Duke of Kent, the Queen's cousin who accompanied her, it looked like his bearskin was somewhere down here, like this. He stood there. I mean, he's quite elderly himself, isn't he, the Duke of Kent? But he is the colonel of the Scots Guards, so he was with the Queen. Now, I think some people wrote that actually he was there instead of the Duke of Edinburgh. Not true. The Queen's done trooping on her own for the past few years, but he was there as the colonel of the Scots Guards.
Yeah, the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh last attended trooping in 2017, shortly before he retired in August 2017. So it wasn't her first one without him by her side. And as you say, the Duke of Kent was there in his role as colonel of the Scots Guards, not instead of Prince Philip.
And not a cold day, perhaps one of the hottest of the year over the weekend. And I mean, the Queen, I mean, that's why I wouldn't want to be wearing one of those bearskins on my head. But she was back out in the quadrangle the following day because someone was coming for tea.
Yeah, back with President Biden and Dr. Joe Biden visited Windsor Castle for tea with the Queen. And this is the 13th serving US president to be met by the Queen. So the only one she hasn't met during her reign is Lyndon Johnson. Truman was the first one she met when she was a princess, but he was still serving when she came to the throne. And she's met 13 in her time.
Yeah, actually the first president she met as Queen was Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Allied commander in the Second World War. Kind of helps to understand how long ago that was, that the Queen was meeting US presidents who had served in the Second World War. But yes, Truman, Eisenhower, JFK, Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Trump. I mean, actually, there's that Trump, Obama. Sorry, I forgot about Obama. Do you remember Obama was driven into Windsor Castle by the Duke of Edinburgh, who was himself about 95 at the time? But yes, there was that moment with Donald Trump that we played on the news again. It's always a good reason. I just like playing it. It's just funny. So have a look at the moment that the Queen and Donald Trump were inspecting the Guard in 2018.
Yeah, for those of you listening, Donald Trump didn't quite maneuver himself into the right position, and the Queen ended up sort of bobbing behind him and then to the side of him and then back behind him and then to the side.
And actually, she was quite a small figure compared to him. But that's by the by. I mean, let's focus on what happened this weekend. So the current president, Joe Biden, and Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady, arrived. So they sort of drove into the quadrangle, didn't they? And went round to the little podium that'd been erected for the Queen. He then inspected the Guard of Honor, and a beautiful day. I mean, there's some amazing shots, even just of Marine One, the president's official helicopter, sort of bringing him in from Heathrow Airport, where Air Force One had landed, into Windsor Castle. I wish we could all travel on Marine One. It makes life a lot easier getting to and from Heathrow Airport. And then he met the Queen, did the Guard of Honor. Have a look at this picture when he kind of went to offer the Queen. So you got one head of state, who's himself 78, offering another head of state, who's 95, a little bit of assistance with the stairs. The Queen politely, not the stairs, the steps off the podium, but the Queen politely declined. And then the three of them, the trio, went off for tea.
Off for tea back in the castle, and by that point it was private. So when she received them in the quadrangle, that was all filmed and photographed and written about. We could all see what was going on there. And then the three of them walked inside the castle for a private tea. A still photograph was published, which we can show you now if you're watching, of the three of them. And then they left, I think, at 3 minutes past 6. Dr. Jill Biden and the president left Windsor Castle, and then we got to hear a little bit from the president about
kind of breaking with tradition, wasn't he? I mean, normally you have your meeting with the Queen, you say nothing about it, but some US reporters asked, I mean, personally, if you ask me, I much prefer the openness, but I mean, I'm talking about tradition. You don't normally talk about what the Queen asked, and we'll run you the entirety of what Joe Biden said, but basically, in summary, before you listen to it, it was that the Queen reminded him of his mother, that she was very gracious, that she asked about President Putin of Russia, President Xi of China, and that he has invited her to the White House for tea, and that the White House could have fitted on the quadrangle of Buckingham Palace. Those are all the things he's about to say, and you're about to hear it.
She was extremely gracious, not surprising, but we had a great talk. She wanted to know what the two leaders that I wanted about to meet with, Mr. Putin, and she wanted to know about about Xi Jinping, and we had a long talk, and she was very generous, very. I don't think she'd be insulted, but my mother. She reminded me of my mother. In terms of the look of her and just the generosity. And I said, ma'am, this is it's a long time. She said, oh no. I said, I wish we could stay longer. Maybe we could hold the cars up a minute. So anyway, she was very gracious.
What is the castle like? Americans never go there. What is that?
By the way, she said, I said, we can fit the White House in the courtyard. And she said, what's it like in the White House? I said, well, it's magnificent, but it's a lot of people. She said, I know. She said, here, she said, on this end we're going is private. The public can go on the other end. So anyway, she was very gracious.
Did you invite her to the White House?
Yes.
And with that, it was up the steps, back onto the plane at Heathrow Airport and off to Brussels. And that was the visit done by the US President and the First Lady to the UK. His first visit outside the US, actually, since he became president because of the pandemic. I think it was a pleasure having them here. I thoroughly enjoyed Joe and Jill being in town. And
a very big few days for the Queen. I mean, three big days, G7, then trooping, and then receiving the Bidens for tea at Windsor Castle. And we said, didn't we, that she would get back out and about on public duties, following the Yeah.
very much she has, yeah.
Duke of Edinburgh, and how keen she was to get back out and about and do face-to-face things post-pandemic, and that, you know, she'd really missed doing that. And I think, you know, seeing her this weekend on tremendous form and, you know, doing really big key events on a world stage proved that that she isn't going anywhere from public life anytime soon.
At age 95, yes, still very much part of what was quite a big moment for the UK being on the world stage. It means we can put our G7 media passes in the trash can, in the bin.
I keep them all. I've got them all. I keep
you
them
keep
all
yours, don't you?
Yeah,
You're going to
all
have
of
such
them.
a big collection of these things very soon. So that's why, anyway, now you know why we delayed the podcast till today, because if we did it on Friday, we would have just, or Thursday or whatever, we just missed all this stuff. So there you have a complete and utter roundup of everything that happened royally from the moment of the announcement of Harry and Meghan's baby, and congratulations to them from us, all the way through to Jill and Joe, the First Lady and President of the United States, coming here, going to Windsor Castle and leaving. And we wish them safe travels, as we do.
Both have tweeted in the last 24 hours to say what an honour it was to meet the Queen.
And it was an honour for us to cover their visit, and also cover the Queen at. You actually quite enjoyed yourself, didn't you? You were inside the quadrangle, Windsor Castle, sunny day, directing the cameras, bossing everyone around.
I didn't boss everyone around. I asked them politely, but no, it was one of those moments that you feel, you know, it was really special to be there for. And when the band comes into the quadrangle, it's you know, it was incredibly impressive. And then seeing the President and the Queen, it was it's an amazing moment. So
it's a bit like when we were there, you know, you always remember little things, didn't you? When we were there for Captain Tom's knighthood as well, just those little moments you just remember, and it makes this job all the more interesting for those little moments. So thanks for watching. It's always a pleasure having you with us. Sorry for the delay. I hope it's not too long. If you got this far, I always say this, you deserve a medal in any case. In fact, we'll send you one of the Prince Philip medals from the Royal Academy of Engineering. For watching.
We won't.
For watching this far through, you deserve one. And we will, depending on what's going on. Actually, is there anything that were you going to record the next podcast on Friday, Thursday, as usual? Anything happening? I don't know. TBC.
TBC.
We might have this podcast as sort of like linking last week and this week, but anyway, we'll be back when there's something to talk about. As you well know, there's always often things to talk about in royal land. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.